WWL-TV, and I'm excited to be here tonight to welcome you all to Conversations in Color, which was created by the Amistad Research Center. Conversations in Color is a free public cultural series that features artists, educators, and community activists in talks about their work and its impact on social change. It provides funding for this series from the Greater New Orleans Foundation, and tonight, as you all know, we are honored to have a very special presenter, Tayari Jones. Let's start with a round of applause for her. Because I know you all are here, so you're very excited about this. Tayari is the author of novels Leaving Atlanta, The Untelling, Silver Sparrow, and her latest work, which was chosen for Oprah's book club, An American Marriage, which if you don't have, is for sale out front, so make sure you guys grab a copy. Her writing has appeared in Tin House, The Believer, The New York Times, and Callaloo. She is a member of the Fellowship of Southern Writers, and she's been a recipient of the Wright Legacy Award, Lifetime Achievement Award in Fine Arts from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, United States Artists Fellowship, NEA Fellowship, and Radcliffe Institute Bunting Fellowship. Silver Sparrow was named a #1 Indie Next pick by Booksellers in 2011, and the NEA added it to its Big Read Library of Classics in 2016. Jones is a graduate of Spelman College, University of Iowa, and Arizona State University, an associate professor in MFA at Rutgers-Newark University, and she spent the 2017-2018 academic year as a Shearing Fellow for Distinguished Writers at Beverly Rogers Carol C. Harter Black Mountain Institute at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Pretty impressive resume, right? We talked backstage, and she was just saying, you see the win, you see the success, you don't see the hard work and the years that add up to it. She really deserves all the accolades that she's been getting. Oprah, as you guys may have been talking about this book, right? She says that you cannot put it down. She says that it resonates with her and that she thinks it will resonate with everyone. It's also a very important story, I think, for Louisiana, because it's about a newlywed man who goes to prison. Louisiana, of course, has the highest incarceration rate in the world. So this is a story that impacts a lot of people in our area and a very important one. We are so honored to have Tayari Jones, Oprah Winfrey 2018 Book Club Selection author and New York Times bestselling author. So please help me welcome her to the stage.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction and for the generous invitation to come here today. I am very honored and pleased to be here. I thought that I would arrange this. I would talk to you all a little bit about how I came and why I wrote An American Marriage, and then I would read from it, and then we could just talk. An American Marriage is a novel that took me 6 years to write. About the year around 2011, like everyone, I had a sense that the country is on fire, that something must be done to change the direction that we're going, particularly around issues of racial justice. And so I wrote a fellowship application to go to the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard to do research. I wanted to do some research to do a book about something involving the prison system. And I went to Harvard and I did all this research. And I learned a lot. I was outraged, I was appalled, I could not believe what was happening just hiding in plain sight, the injustice. But you know what, I wasn't inspired. I didn't feel motivated to write a story. I didn't have that spark. And I didn't know what to do. Just imagine, I'm here, I'm at Harvard, I've been accepted. They want us to give a presentation of the writing we've done. And I have been working, but I don't have any writing to show. I just have a bunch of Post-it notes, a lot of index cards, angrily underlined passages in the New Jim Crow. But they didn't bring me there to underline passages in the New Jim Crow. And I was really frustrated because I wanted to take my writing to another level and engage with the issues of the day, because I feel like if you feel that something's wrong in the world, you should try to change it. And we use the gifts and talents we have to make change. And I was trying to do it. I mean, I knew other people had successfully written novels engaging the issues of the day, so why couldn't I? When I started writing, I just didn't have a story. I was really frustrated, and I was anxious. And I went home to Atlanta, where I'm from. I went to visit my mother, and while I was there, I went to the mall. And when I was in the mall, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. It was in the food court. there was a woman, she was splendidly dressed. I still remember that coat she had on. It's just so beautiful, belt buckle, everything. She just looked beautiful. And she did not look like the kind of woman that would be arguing with her man in the food court. Yet there she was. And I think, it can happen to anyone. I think we can all testify. We may not look like that kind of person, but under the right kind of circumstances, you can be that kind of person. So she looked beautiful and he looked fine. So they were mismatched, but I could tell that they were in love and in trouble. And I heard her say, clear as a bell, she said, "Roy, you know you wouldn't have waited on me for 7 years." I was intrigued. I looked, I didn't want to turn around and interrupt, but I looked at her. And I didn't know her. I didn't know him. But I did feel fairly confident that he would not have waited on her for 7 years. So I was like, "Ma'am, you have a point." And then he shot back. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about. This wouldn't have happened to you in the first place." And I was like, "You're right, sir. This probably wouldn't have happened to her in the first place." And for me, I know that I have a novel when I have a story where both people have a point. They were both right. Yet neither of them was completely right. So that is how An American Marriage came to be. An American Marriage is a story of a young couple, Celestial and Roy. They have only been married 18 months. As she says, "I was a newlywed. I was still combing the rice from my hair." She says, "We were still counting the time off in months like you do with a baby." She says, "My daddy was still paying for the wedding." She is not sure if she is yet a wife or if she's still a bride. He is from a small town in northern Louisiana. He has moved to Atlanta to go to Morehouse College and find his fortune. And he's married this woman who's from this kind of upper class Atlanta family, and he feels like he is on the way up. And they are in love. And they go down to the Louisiana town, and while they're there, he is arrested for a crime he does not commit. And he is given a 12-year sentence, and they have only been married 18 months. So once I had this story, I was able to write, but I had to rewrite this novel 3 times before I was able to get it right. The first time I wrote it from the point of view of the wife, Celestial, because I was really interested in the women who are left behind and how she makes the balance as to, just like any woman, how much of her life and time and energy she gives to her marriage and how much she gives to herself, except the stakes are crazy high because her husband is wrongfully incarcerated. I wrote the entire book from beginning to end from her point of view, but it didn't feel quite right. It felt like only half the story. People would say, "Well, what about Roy? What about Roy? What about Roy?" And I resisted it because I really felt like her life was worthy just because it was hers. But it just wasn't hitting the right note in the book. So finally, I rewrote the entire story from his point of view. I wrote the story of a black man accused of a crime he didn't commit. He goes to prison and he gets out, and all he wants to do is to find his faithful wife. And I wrote it, and I wrote that draft really fast. And it was interesting to me why I could write it so fast. After all, I'm a woman, he's a man. Why was I able to capture his voice so easily? I was suspicious of it. It was too easy. And I realized it was so easy because that's a story I've heard all my life. That's a way that I have been trained to understand racial injustice. As a man, he has a problem, and what he needs is a traditional woman. And so I didn't want to just reinscribe that old story. So I thought maybe I could take the 2 drafts I had written and put them together, his, hers. But I just didn't quite like it because I don't think it's a spoiler to reveal that this is a love story, but it is a love triangle. And so I added a 3rd voice, which is the voice of her childhood friend, Andre, who she's known all her life, ever since they were 2 little babies. They used to take a bath in a sink. You know, you're little, take a bath in a sink when you're like a little baby. So she's known him since the sink days. And so their relationship has changed. And so when I had the 3 of their voices, I felt like I had the whole story. And that's why it took me 6 years. The book was 4 years overdue. I didn't think I could finish it. I was saving my money to return the advance to the publisher because I thought I couldn't finish it. But I realized that the question of the book isn't whether or not Roy can get back his job, get back his wife, get back his house, get back all the things he wants to get back. The question is, how can he regain his citizenship into his own life? And I discovered that the key to all of this is not really about Roy versus the system, Roy versus Andre. It's about the ways that we can free ourselves through our empathy and humanity. I thought that I would read a little bit from the book before I take your questions, and then we can just talk about whatever you want to talk about involving this. And I do not have on my glasses. I am 47 years old, and this whole idea of not really being able to see is new. But I think it's going to be okay. Unless somebody has some 1.5 readers on them that these are cute. This is I'm going to read the point of view of Celestial on that fateful day, and then a couple of the letters they exchanged while he's in prison. What I know is this: they didn't believe me. 12 people and not one of them took me at my word. There in front of the room, I explained that Roy couldn't have raped the woman in room 206 because we had been together. I told them about the magic fingers that wouldn't work, about the movie that played on the snowy television. The prosecutor asked me what we had been fighting about. Rattled, I looked to Roy and to both our mothers. Banks objected, so I didn't have to answer, but the pause made it appear that I was concealing something rotten at the pit of our very young marriage. Even before I stepped down from the witness stand, I knew that I had failed him. Maybe I wasn't appealing enough, not dramatic enough, not from around here. Who knows? Uncle Banks, coaching me, had said, now it's not the time to be articulate. Now is the time to give it up. No filter, all heart. No matter what you're asked, what you want the jury to see is why you married him. I tried, but I didn't know how to be anything other than well-spoken in front of strangers. I wish that I could have brought a selection of my art, the Man Moving series, all images of Roy, the marbles, the dolls, and a few watercolors. I would say, this is who he is to me. Isn't he beautiful? Isn't he gentle? But all I had were words which were light and flimsy as air. As I took my seat, not even the black lady juror would look at me. It turns out that I watched too much television. I was expecting a scientist to come and testify about DNA. I was looking for a pair of handsome detectives to burst into the courtroom at the last minute, whispering something urgent. Everyone would see that this was a big mistake, a major misunderstanding. We would all be shaken but appeased. I fully believed that I would leave the courtroom with my husband beside me. Secure in our home, we would tell people how no black man is really safe in America. 12 years is what they gave him. We would be 43 years old when he was released. I couldn't even imagine myself at such an age. Roy understood that 12 years was an eternity because he sobbed right there at the defendant's table. His knees gave way and he fell into his chair. The judge paused and demanded that Roy bear this news on his feet. He stood again and cried, not like a baby, but in a way that only a grown man can cry, from the bottom of his feet up through his torso and finally through his mouth. When a man wails like that, you know it's all the tears he was never allowed to shed, from Little League disappointment to teenage heartbreak, all the way up to whatever injured his spirit just last year. As Roy howled, my fingers kept worrying a rough patch of skin beneath my chin, a souvenir of scar tissue. When they did what I remember as kicking in the door, what everyone else remembers as opening it with the plastic key, after the door was open, however it was open, we were both pulled from the bed. They dragged Roy into the parking lot, and I followed, lunging for him, wearing nothing but the white slip. Someone pushed me to the ground, and my chin hit the pavement. My slip rode up, showing everything to everyone, and my tooth sank into the soft skin of my bottom lip. Roy was on the asphalt beside me, barely beyond my grasp, speaking words that didn't reach my ears. I don't know how long we lay there, parallel like burial plots. Husband, wife, what God has brought together, let no man tear asunder. After he is taken to prison, they communicate through letters, and I thought I would read one of her letters and then one of his. Dear Roy, I'm sitting at the kitchen table. I'm alone in a way that's more than the fact that I'm the only living person within these walls. Up until now, I thought I knew what was and wasn't possible. Maybe that's what innocence is, having no way to predict the pain of the future. When something happens that eclipses the imaginable, it changes a person. It's like the difference between a raw egg and a scrambled egg. It's the same thing, but it's not the same at all. That's the best way that I can put it. I look in the mirror and I know it's me, but I can't quite recognize myself. Sometimes it's exhausting for me to simply walk into the house. I try to be calm, remembering that I've lived alone before. Sleeping by myself didn't kill me then, and it will not kill me now. But this is what loss has taught me of love. Our house isn't simply empty. Our home has been emptied. Love makes a place in your life. It makes a place for itself in your bed. Invisibly, it makes a place in your body, rerouting all your blood vessels, throbbing right alongside your heart. When it's gone, nothing is whole again. Before I met you, I was not lonely, but now I'm so lonely, I talk to the walls. They say that you can't receive mail for at least a month. Still, I'll write to you every night. Yours, Celestial. Then he writes back. Dear Celestial, I don't think I've written a letter to anyone since I was in high school and assigned a French pen pal, and that whole thing lasted about 10 minutes. I know for sure that this is the first time I ever wrote a love letter, and that's what this is going to be. Celestial, I love you, I miss you, I want to come home to you. Look at me telling you the things you already know. I'm trying to write something on the paper that'll make you remember me, the real me, not the man you saw standing in a broke-down country courtroom, broke down myself. I was too ashamed to turn toward you, but now I wish I had, because now I would do anything for one more look. This love letter thing is uphill for me. I've never even seen one unless you count the 3rd grade. Do you like me? Check yes, no? Don't answer that. A love letter is supposed to be like music or like Shakespeare, but I don't know anything about Shakespeare. But for real, I want to tell you what you mean to me, but it's like trying to count the seconds of the day on your fingers and toes. Why didn't I write you love letters all the while so I could be in practice? Then I would know what to do. That's how I feel every day in here, like I don't know what to do or how to do it. I've always let you know how much I care, right? You never had to wonder. I'm not a man for words. My daddy showed me that you do for a woman. Remember that time you damn near had a nervous breakdown because it looked like the hickory tree in the front yard was thinking about dying? Where I'm from, we don't believe in spending money on pets, let alone trees. But I couldn't bear to see you cry, so I hired a tree doctor. See, in my mind, that was a love letter. The first thing I did as your husband was to sit you down, like the old people say. You were wasting your time and talents doing temp work. You wanted to sew, so I made it happen. No strings. That was my love letter to say, I got this. Make your art. Do what you need to do. But now, all I have is this paper and this raggedy ink pen. It's a ballpoint, but they take away the casing, so you just have the nib and this plastic tube of ink. I'm looking at it thinking, this is all I have to be a husband with? But here I am trying. Love, Roy. So I thought I'd pause there and we can talk. And if you want me to read some more later on, I can. But I thought we'd just take some time because I want to know what you're thinking about. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Shearing.
Hi, Sharon.
We met 1,000 years ago, and I've been waiting for you to come here for months, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Welcome. I pre-ordered the book and read it in about a day and a half, in between doing everything that I had to do in my normal life. Go to the bathroom, read.
Well, thank you.
So I will say that the book is absolutely excellent. I wanted to commend you on the story that you told here, and I kind of really have some commentary that I would ask you to comment. Oh, thank you. Ask you to comment on whenever I get it out. I wrote to you in the middle of reading the book one morning because it touched me so much. I'm comfortable enough to share that I have a son who is in prison with a 25-year sentence, and very young, was convicted at 20. So much like this situation, he'll be 40 years old plus when he walks out of there, if it works out the way it stands at today. So this touched me in ways I can't even begin to tell you, but especially because he has a very devoted girlfriend who is living through this experience with him. So this touched me all kinds of ways, and when you say that when someone is in prison, it has an impact on the entire community, I can speak and attest to that firsthand. A couple things that I will ask you to kind of talk about. I love the way you developed the parents in this story. And I know this isn't necessarily something that gets a lot of discussion, but both Celestial's parents and Roy's parents, in the context of how they deal with the situation, how they respond to the situation. Celestial's this princess of a child for her father especially. And when some of the conflict that she and Roy experienced starts to take place, I was amazed by the loyalty her father has to Roy, even up to and including putting distance between him and this beloved child of his. And then on the other hand, you had Roy's mother, who in her mind, much like my son, could not do anything wrong ever, no matter what happened. And then to have the point in the story where she actually questions him about whether or not he maybe did or didn't commit this crime. I just thought that was amazing to have that kind of stretch for both of those parents, because intuitively you would believe that, Celestial's father would be 12 years, you've been married for 18 months, hey, hit the road, Jack, don't come back no more, but he was like, hey, you need to be loyal. And then Roy's mom, on the other hand, you would have thought she would have been out there picketing everybody. My son wouldn't have, never would have, but she had to ask that question. And so I just think that, I'm just curious about how you made decisions about how the parents would respond, because they were not what I personally would have expected. So, and like I said, I could talk to you forever about this book, so
Well,
I'll stop there.
I'll say thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, it's a story that's so many people's story, but I don't think it's talked about enough. So I appreciate you bringing that here. Now, Celestial's parents. Celestial is her father's princess. Well, he's fond of her. I don't know if he thinks of her as a princess. I mean, I think that Celestial is a woman that everyone, before Roy goes to prison, everybody loves how independent she is. Everyone, that's like one of her charming things about her, that she's an artist, that she's independent, that she goes her own way, But then when Roy goes to prison, everyone, I always say when the going gets tough, people get conservative, right? Like when Roy goes to prison, they're like, okay, all that independence, we don't have the luxury of you being an independent woman. You need to be, loyal. You need to put his priorities above your own at all times. Because Roy is a black man who's been wrongfully imprisoned. He has an archetypal black man problem, and her father is loyal to her as his daughter, but he is also very race loyal, and he understands her moving on with her life as being disloyal not to Roy specifically, but disloyal to the racial project. And if you know, it's like a lot of times there's a lot of women who are very close to their fathers, and the thing that brings them apart is a question of sexual appropriateness. That is the thing that, because men who think of their daughters as princesses, they like their daughters to be on the straight and narrow, right? So the fact that she is having this sexual relationship with Andre, that means she's not a little princess anymore. And so I think that's why her father has that loyalty to Roy over her, because also Roy represents the race. So she's having like an intersectional feminist moment, and her father is having like an old school one-track kind of racial understanding of life. As for Roy, his mother, like Roy, I don't think anyone would ever say Roy is a princess, but Roy is a princess to his parents. Like his parents have devoted both both his parents have together devoted their entire life to him, but because he's in such peril, it doesn't feel like they are overreacting. And like with Celestial, it seems like, oh, they're just spoiling their daughter, but Roy's parents are protecting their son. But they are actually exactly the same way toward their kids. It's just that we have a better expectation for that kind of protection of a man because we feel like they're in such danger. But I think his mother just wanted to hear, she knows she's ill. She just wants him to hear him say it. She just wants to hear him say it. And I do think that accusations, just being accused of a crime, makes you, it calls you into question. Even if the person believes you didn't do it. As Roy said, what about the second side that every story is supposed to have? And that is the thing about being wrongfully accused, even if you're acquitted, having that question. Like if you haven't ever been accused of a crime, the question of whether or not you're a criminal is never a question. But when you have been accused of one, just even the fact that someone has to say, no, you're not a criminal, brings up the question of whether you're a criminal.
I wanted to comment on the fact of where you were saying that the father was loyal to the race. And I saw in that particular exchange that the father was also loyal to the gender, even above his own daughters.
Don't you think he and his fine those are the same things?
Well, race, gender, two different things. Because I feel like he said he saw her, he did not maybe see her needs as, you touched on the fact he couldn't see her as a princess ministering to her own needs in a sexual way. But I think it also speaks to the question of a man's right to have a certain element of a need that a woman has not been permissioned to have or to demonstrate. And that's one of the things that I saw in it.
Yeah, I do think that, yes. I mean, he does not see that his daughter wants, deserves companionship in her life. And I think I'm kind of thinking whether or not I think the father thinks that having loyalty to Roy as a black man means race loyalty. I don't think he's thought about what race loyalty would mean in terms of his daughter. Because, like when he's talking about Roy the father, her father he's a self-made man, he's a millionaire, he's an inventor, he's like really eccentric guy, but he's like this tall, and he's just so mad, he says to Celestial, that man is a hostage of the state, the least you could do. Like he's just, beyond himself with outrage. But I do think that what I read and you read is loyalty to his gender, he reads as loyalty to race.
We know you're right because you wrote the book.
I'm very enthralled. I'm not quite done, but I'm extremely enthralled. And I have experienced at least two threads in your writing style. And I'd love for you to talk about, and maybe I could be wrong, but this is what I've been experiencing. Can you talk about the device or your usage of secrets and non-confrontation as a tool in developing these characters?
I do don't you think all novels on some level are about a secret?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what makes the plot unfold. And I don't think I guess this novel does have some, I know what you're talking about. Oh yeah, that is a big secret. I think I am drawn to a fast-moving, involved plot. And it's funny because I teach, in an MFA program, a lot of times in that kind of writing, students are really encouraged not to be very plotty. The idea is that the ideal novel is a novel where a bunch of people just sit around and think, in the same room, like two people in the same room thinking thoughts. But I like a novel where the people do something. Like I feel like characters do stuff and they need to do things. And I do feel like the revealing of secrets kind of makes the novel open up. I like to write a novel that feels like something I would want to read, not something that I think I should read, but something that I want to read. So I think that is why I like to deal in secrets. But I have not figured out why I really like all this questionable paternity. I'm sure you notice I keep doing that. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. Right. Well, I do think if you have a non-confrontation, then when it explodes toward the end of the book, it draws to it. But I was also very interested, though, in how many fathers are in this book. There are so many fathers, even though, rumor has it that we don't have fathers. But there are so many fathers. And all of these fathers, even the absent fathers, when they show up, they are just like fathering their little hearts out. Like they all think that they can father their way out of this problem. And and also all fathers, because, I have a father. I have an uncle too. That's my Uncle Wilbert right there. But my father, I feel like everybody's father. Don't you think fathers are all under the impression that they are funny? Yeah, they think they're funny. And so the fathers in this book, they all think they're funny too. And I feel like they also gave some levity to the story. Even when they're dead wrong, I felt like they gave some lightness. It was really important to me that I put lightness in the book. I feel like when I say this is a story about a man who's wrongfully incarcerated, everyone thinks the book is going to be a drag, right? It's going to be like eating your vegetables, learning something you need to know. But I thought it was really important to have a certain amount of humor and joy in the book, because I feel like when you don't have joy, then you are not giving your characters the full range of their humanity. Yes, ma'am.
My question isn't necessarily about the book, but it's about the perception of things that could be related to the book. All of the things about wrongful incarceration. But one of the things that has always intrigued me, and maybe I'm giving away my own book, is the idea of the strength of love throughout incarceration. Because for me, one of the things that I have a former student who suddenly on her Facebook page was writing about this man, and you thought, oh my gosh, she's met this, amazing man, until one day there's a picture. And there's this picture, and you can tell that it's one of the prison pictures. And so I've been mystified by the strength or the portrayal of their relationship. And so I don't know if that kind of entered your mind through the writing about the strength and longevity. I have to confess I'm not finished with the book because I'm, immersed in Isabel Wilkerson's book right now too, which is a Bible. So I'm just wondering, did that enter the strength and longevity of a loving relationship through incarceration?
Yeah, no, actually. Because I felt like when I would say this is a novel about a woman, her husband's wrongfully incarcerated, everyone was expecting a novel about this kind of selfless, enduring Black woman holding it down, putting everything beside just doing it. And I really was not interested. I was not interested. I felt like it wasn't complex, and I felt it was a story we already knew. I feel like that story dates all the way back to the Odyssey. Didn't y'all read the Odyssey in high school? How Penelope just hung in there while Odysseus was sailing the seven seas and doing whatever? Ride or die. Thank you. Yeah, and I really wanted to kind of interrogate that, because I feel like that is a way of, one, explaining Black women's lives in the context only of their men, and this rewarding this, not ever considering her needs at all, right? And I just wanted to do something different, and I wanted to interrogate it, because for me that is a huge question of how does one at once be concerned about this injustice that is the scourge of mass incarceration. It is an injustice, and we all have an obligation to do something to change that. But at the same time, how does she take care of herself? And I was interested in love, but in the way love changes. Because I'm sure you all have gathered from what I'm saying, if you haven't read it, that, it's a love triangle. She has another man, but she says, I don't think love ever goes away, but it changes its shape. And she tells him, I can't be your wife. She doesn't say, I can't. You want me to read that? Want me to read that letter? Okay, let me read that one. Can I break out the glasses again? Okay, hold on. Okay. So they communicate all the time he's in prison. I only do it through letters. And I did that for two reasons. One, I'm a letter writer. I write 5 or 6 letters a week. And can I tell you, nobody writes me back. But I like the letters because, one, it spared us as a reader, because we only have the details of prison that he's willing to share with his wife, and he doesn't want to give her all the really horrific details. And I thought that shielded us. It taught us about their relationship, but it shielded us as readers from having to experience that vicariously. And also with letters, you can see how they literally have a small canvas on which to have their marriage. But this is her last letter to him. It's only on page 80. It happens early. I don't think I'm spoiling the book. Dear Roy, this is the letter I promised I would never send. Before I go any further, I want to tell you that I'm sorry. I want to tell you that even typing these words is killing me. I won't say that this will hurt me more than it hurts you, because I know how much you're hurting every day, and no matter what is happening to me, it will never compare. I understand that I'm not in the same agony as you are, but I'm in pain and I cannot continue to live this way. I can't go on being your wife. In some ways, I feel like I never got a chance to try my hand at that role. We were only married a year and a half before lightning struck, counting off the time in months like you do with a baby. I have done my best to be married without actually being a wife for 3 years now. You're going to think this is about another man, but this is about the two of us, about our delicate cord that has been shredded by your incarceration. At your mother's funeral, your father showed what the connection is between a husband and a wife. If he could have, he would have gone into the grave instead of her, but they lived under one roof for more than 30 years. In some ways, they grew together and they grew up together, and had she not died, they would have grown old together. That's what a marriage is. What we have here isn't a marriage. A marriage is more than your heart, it's your life, and we are not sharing ours. I blame it on time, not on you or me. If we put a penny in a jar for each day we've been married and took a penny away for each day we've been apart, the jar would have been depleted a long time ago. I've been trying to find ways to add more pennies, but our visits in that busy room at that sad table send me home with empty hands. I know this, and you do too. The last 3 times I have visited, we've said almost nothing to each other. You can't bear to hear about my days, and I can't bear to hear about yours. I am not abandoning you. I will never abandon you. My uncle will continue to file appeals. I'll continue to keep your commissary up to date, and I'll visit you every month. I can come as your friend, as your ally, as your sister. You're part of my family, Roy, and you always will be, but I can't be your wife. Love, and I mean it, Celestial. Okay, I'll tell you what he said. Y'all want to see what he said back? He did not take it well. Then I'll stop, I promise. Then I'll stop. He says, Dear Celestial, what do you want me to say? Am I supposed to say that I'm okay with us being just friends? Maybe it's me, but I had a different interpretation of till death do us part. Because the last time I checked, I wasn't dead yet. But you do what you have to do. Be an empowered woman or whatever they taught you in college. Leave a brother when he's down. I never thought you would be this kind of person. There are women around here who've been coming to see their men for decades, riding buses that leave Baton Rouge at 5 a.m. Walter, that's his cellmate. Walter has women he has never even met in person, and they come see him, and when they get here, they do more than talk. Some women bunk in their cars in the parking lot so they can be in the visiting room as soon as it opens. Before she died, my mother was here every week. What is it that makes you think you're so much better than all of them? Don't come here talking about you're here to be my friend. I don't need any friends. I forgot how mad he was. I haven't read that in a long time. But that is this conflict that we're talking about, right? She says, I can be here for you, but not as your wife. And so the question is that all that is, if she cannot be here as his wife, does she not have anything to offer to him? Like, is it all or nothing? And that's the question. And that's only on page 80. I didn't give it away. It's just page 8. It's like all the way up here. Look, it's just right here. But we have all this left. It's a lot. Is that Dean Hill? Hello, that's my dean from when I was in college. Hello, Dean Hill. Thank you.
Okay, it's me again. 2 things. I want to comment on how great you look. If you're really doing this with a carry-on bag.
I am doing this with a carry-on bag.
You do better than I do at my whole closet, girl. So you
well,
go ahead on.
thank
You
you.
look good. I've been watching you. I've been living vicariously through you through this whole process, and I've watched you from city to city. You look good. I'm on Facebook with you. So
Thank you.
you're doing a great job. But let me ask you, technically speaking, you do this fantastic thing with the pacing in this book. I've read all your books, but I really love the way you reveal the backstories of your characters in this book. Like you tell, and I'm not going to give away all the wonderful secrets, but
Wait, easy.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to. But the way that you do that, can you kind of talk about how you develop that? I mean, like literally the technique. I mean, from telling the backstory of Celestial's parents and how they get together to Celestial's life prior to coming back to Spelman, coming back to Atlanta, even Roy's parents, the way you kind of reveal their backstory and the decisions you make about when to tell those stories, because it kind of dovetails to a certain extent with what Celestial and Roy are going through at a given point in time, but it also informs the way that they kind of build their interaction with each other. So can you kind of talk about that?
Okay, well, I told you I had to write the book over 3 times, right? So every time I wrote it, I learned something else, and then I could incorporate what I had learned into the next draft. So when I first write it, the chapters don't really connect that well. They're more like things that I thought have happened to the characters. And then when I come back, I figure out how to link them. Because the way pacing works in a novel is that everything that happens in the book has to happen because of something else. So you have chapter 1. Then chapter 2 has to happen because of chapter 1. Chapter 3 has to happen because of chapter 2. The causal relationship is what gives it an engine. It has to feel like dominoes falling. But when I first write it, the dominoes are not necessarily touching each other. You know how you ever tried to play that domino game when you were a child, you saw it on TV, you thought you were going to set up some dominoes, and sometimes you get one domino just falls and the other domino is like, what? And so then in the revision, I bring them closer to make the dominoes hit. And that happens over and over. Because my feeling is this: when I first start the story, it's just like when you meet a person in real life. You know what they look like, you make some assumptions, but you don't know them, and you just have like a superficial understanding. And as you get to know that person better, and let's say you become friends, or let's even say you become lovers, then you look back on how you met, and you can see all the different things that were going on that you didn't know what you were looking at. And so that's what I do when I revise. I underline those things that end up being important. But when I write it the first time, I didn't know they were important.
Thank you.
Although I don't recommend to anyone that they write their book over and over and over. It was very difficult and unpleasant. You should call on her because she hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Oh, y'all so nice. We'll do you, then we do you, then we come back. Okay.
Congratulations, Tayari. This is my classmate from Spelman. And,
That's in 1991.
1991. I just absolutely love the book. I've told everybody I know about the book. But one of the things I really want to do with the book is share it with my own college students that I teach. And one of the things that I saw that was so powerful, and thank you so much for putting the communication in letter form and not in text message and email, because it really shows, particularly from Roy's point of view, for the males, that they can also write, they can still write letters. And they can write powerful letters, because I heard Roy's voice in the letters. I see anxiety when he's with Celestial in person, when he's watching her. I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't finished reading, but I really hear his concern about their relationship. And one of the things I always have to keep in mind is that it was only 18 months, and so they didn't have that 30-year cement of a marriage. But I love the letter form, and what I'd like to use and to show is how strong the communication, the written word is in terms of interpreting their feelings. So I know you kind of touched on it just a little bit before, but is there, when I look at the tone in your particular word usage, did you mean for it to come across stronger in the letter form as opposed to when they're communicating face to face, or was that just how it happened?
Well, I feel like in letters, it takes so long to write a letter and you go over and you make it better. When you're speaking in person, you're just talking, right? Like you don't revise, you say things maybe you didn't mean to say. So in the letter writing, they're a lot more deliberate in what they say to one another. I would love for letter writing to come back in style. I'm trying to bring it back. I'm really trying to bring it back, because also I like the paper trail that letters leave. Have you ever discovered a letter, found, you can go in antique stores, you can buy letters and read correspondence between people from, 100 years ago. I guess maybe that'll happen with technology, but I had a hard time avoiding technology in this book. Technology is a problem when you're trying to write a novel. If you think about it, like Romeo and Juliet, if they had been able to text each other, none of that would have happened. Juliet could have been like, I'm not dead, LOL, get back at me. And that would have been that, and the whole thing. In my generation, we're like the last generation where people could credibly not get in touch with people. Like so many stories involve people not being able to connect. Like we're the generation where someone could claim to have called you and you just weren't home. But now with the technology and all the instant communication, it has changed the way plots work. Like there's a scene where I really needed Andre not to be able to be in touch with Celestial. But there was like no reason why you can't be in touch with someone in this day and age. So then I had to come up with a reason why he would decide not to call her. That's a different plot maneuver than if he just called and she wasn't home. Because now it's not a matter if you're home, it's just if your phone is in your pocket. So that was really, really challenging for me. I expect the next generation of writers will be so at home with technology that they will just include it in stories, because that'll be the way they understand their lives. But for me, it was a real challenge. Cell phone. Oh, yes.
Okay, so I am a psychology and a criminal justice major, and I haven't read your book yet, but I can see the different sides of how everything's connected, and thank you for doing that. But also, how did you do the psychological aspect of like the psychological aspect from Roy's point of view and Celestial's point of view in this whole shebang?
And Andre, don't forget Andre.
Oh yeah, and Andre, him too.
Well, what I discovered in writing this book is that the challenges that Celestial and Roy have are really, in many ways, relationship challenges that everyone has, but because he's incarcerated, it's like turned up to 20, right? Like most people experience these things turned up to 7 or 8. Like the question of how much of your life do you devote to your relationship, how much do you devote to yourself? Because she's got this big career as an artist. So that's a question that I can relate to, fairly autobiographically, but then when you add the dimension of he's incarcerated, then it just makes it tighter. But I think I'm a person who believes that if you've ever been trapped in an elevator, you can write about what it would be to be trapped in a spaceship. I mean, there are limits to it. Like, for example, I don't believe that if you have stubbed your toe, you can magnify it by 10,000 and imagine what it is to be tortured. I don't think it goes that far, but I do think there is a range of which you can amplify or decrease your own experience to imagine another space. But I also read a lot of oral histories of men who have been wrongfully incarcerated. And the most interesting thing I found in those oral histories is that when they talked about their experience in prison, the wrongful wasn't the part that they dwelled upon. It was more upon the reality of incarceration. They seemed to be suggesting that incarceration, and the way incarceration is done in this country, no one should be subjected to that. So I was very interested in the fact that they weren't like, this shouldn't happen to me because I'm a good person. They were more critiquing the system generally, and I decided to follow that lead in writing this, where the issue really wasn't that Roy is innocent. It is that he's a human being. Where's my yeah.
Hi, hello, my name is Faye. I don't know if I'm the oldest person in this room. I will just say I graduated from college in 1968.
You're not the oldest person.
Okay. My question is, I have always loved books, and I'm so glad that women like you are still writing books. I don't want a Kindle. I want to hold a book in my hand. So my question is, I had read about you in the paper that you were going to come, but I didn't have the book. So I had to take my oldest daughter and granddaughter back to the airport. So I had to plan my trip so I could hit Barnes and Nobles before I got here so I could have my book. But my question is, they went back to Portland, Oregon, and I want to know, do you have any dates? Because I told my daughter about the book, and she had read about it too. Are you going to Portland, Oregon anytime soon?
July 7th.
When is it?
July.
Okay, I will tell her.
July 7th, I'll be in Portland. I have been in a different city every day since February 6th
Okay.
with my little carry-on bag.
Okay, I will
I'm
tell.
going to burn these clothes. I never want to see them again. I am so tired. I never want to see this blouse again.
Do you know where you're going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be at Reed College.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Then after you, there's somebody behind you. But you can go. Oh,
Just a quick question.
oh that was sweet.
We're writing the book. Did you get to meet with prisoners and talk to them and see how the prison was changing them?
Here's the thing. Because with my last novel, Silver Sparrow, it was a big read selection, and so, we did workshops in prison and such. I was very wary of asking people I don't know to tell me their business for my book. You know what I mean? Like I felt like I didn't want to be that person. So what I did was, like I said, I read the oral histories of people because those are people who consented to participate in something and wanted their story out there. But there was just something that felt wrong about me being on the fellowship at Harvard University, being like, hello, I'm from Harvard, can you tell me, you know? So I didn't do it. But I feel like all the reading I did and the way that I just imagined, I mean, the thing about mass incarceration is that they call it mass incarceration because it happens to so many people that I don't think any of us in here are more than 1 or at maximum 2 degrees of separation because it's such a part of the culture from someone who's been incarcerated.
I wanted to ask, which of the characters do you most see yourself in, or do you see yourself in a range of them, a group, like a little bit of yourself in every character? Because my thought was that maybe when you wrote the part that you read to us with Celeste's letter, informing her husband that she could no longer be his wife, I thought that was so liberating, the level of honesty that she allowed herself, that maybe you had a bowl of ice cream afterwards, because it probably spoke to you in ways that you liberated yourself and said no to things that other people may have thought for you, and you permissioned yourself that I know it seems right, but this isn't right for me. And I was just wondering, did you have that kind of connection when you wrote that segment?
It was liberating for me to write this book because I was under a lot of pressure to write a different book. Like, I was just, who was I being interviewed by? I was just telling, the Atlantic. I was just telling them that, like, when I first started this book, I was like, I'm writing this book about this woman, her husband's wrongfully incarcerated, and this is about the ways that her life moves on. I told that pitch to this friend of mine, a man, and he physically, like, stepped away from me. Like, he was mad at me for just thinking about it. Like, he was looking at me like I was a different person than the person he thought he knew. And so I felt like just in writing this book was like this transgressive act. And that was a hard thing because I'm used to writing a book that when I'm working on it, I tell people what I'm working on, and they're like, oh, good, that's an important story. I'm glad you're telling it. I wrote my first book about growing up in Atlanta during the Atlanta child murders. And I would say I'm working on the book about growing up in Atlanta during the child murders. And people would say, that's good because that story has been forgotten. And those children need you to tell that story. So I was used to telling people what I'm working on. And they would pat me on the head. And people were mad at me for just... And so when I decided that me and Celestial, we were in this and we were going to see this story through, that it was liberating, but like any liberation, it was hard earned because I was right. It was the first time I had ever written fearfully. I wrote fearfully because I was thinking, what are people? I never worried about what people were going to think because I always felt like me and the people I write for are on the same page. And with this one, I felt like I was going out on a limb in a different kind of way. I stopped talking to people about the book because people were just so mad at it. So I'm really surprised that once it came together, it connected with so many people. The success of this book is the biggest surprise of my life. Speaking of surprises, I can't believe nobody wants to know about when Oprah called me on the phone. Y'all are so mature. Y'all are mature. Okay. Oprah called me on the telephone. I was minding my own business. I was driving my car, and you know how you have your cell phone connected to your car? And so it rang, and it said block call. And I'm interested in block calls. When I get a block call, I'm like, that person blocked this call for a reason. I wonder what it was. So I said, hello? And the voice on the other side said, hi, this is Oprah. And I put on my flashers, and I pulled over. And I said, ma'am, and she said, I read your book, and the book wasn't out. This was way back in October. I had to keep this secret from October through February. And she said, I've read your book, and I'd like to use your book for my book club. What do you think about that? And I said, yes, ma'am, I think that would be nice. And it was the most exciting thing that has ever happened to me in my life. And so then I had to go to take the pictures, and I only had 24 hours. They're like, we need you to fly in tomorrow to take pictures. So I didn't have a chance to, get a new hairdo, get a new outfit. I had to really come as I was. But I now look back on it, and I'm kind of glad because she read the book before it was even properly edited and corrected. She read it very early. So I felt like when she read the book, I had come as I was in a different kind of way, and then I showed up in person as I was. And it's been fantastic. It's a lot of publicity, a big boost, in my audience. But also, I feel like Oprah Winfrey has lent me her good name. Like, she has let me borrow her good name for this project, and she did so in good faith. And so I'm really trying to further her goal of using books to bring people together, but also to try to do events to bring books where books haven't been, because she is giving me this backing, and I just want to, this may sound corny, but I want to be worthy of it. So that's how that went, but it's super exciting.
So how did she get a copy of the book?
She, Oprah. Well, when you write, so once you write, also in the electronic age, I think books get around more. Like when I first wrote my first book, you have to print that sucker out, put it in a box and mail it. And so people are not passing them around willy-nilly because the postage alone, to mail 300 sheets of paper. But, I had submitted it to my publisher, so it had already been, so it was in the works, it was in the world. And I think that people who read books often, I think they pass them on to her. They're like, oh, I think you might dig this.
I will say, following you, especially on social media, you did a great job in keeping that secret. I actually invited my friend here to come to this with me, and then the next day, I think the Oprah thing got announced, and I was like, I didn't even know that was coming because she kept that secret fantastically. But what I was
Yeah, you have to sign a non-disclosure.
Oh, Lord. But I will also say, though, I imagine, I'm far from Oprah calling me, but I imagine if I'd written a book that Oprah wanted to call me about, and then I had to keep a secret, I could have done that for her. But I think I might have just kind of relaxed into the book, and you worked your butt off to publicize this book. You did not take off your shoes and put your feet up and say, Oprah got this. Because I pre-ordered this book. I don't have a hole in it. I'll just put it that way. I pre-ordered it, and Amazon brought it to my doorstep a week or two before the Oprah announcement, I think, came out. And I was so excited to get it. But when the Oprah thing came, I was like shocked. I was going back through your stuff. I was like, Tayari.
That's right.
And you were.
I'm not having Oprah mad at me. That was my biggest fear, though, that it would get out. And then, can you imagine if Oprah was mad at you? That's a horrifying thought, isn't it? But I also, though, here's the thing. When you have the Oprah endorsement, if that book is not a success, you can't blame anybody but yourself. You can't blame the publisher. You cannot blame anyone but yourself and your book. And that was actually a fear of mine that I had, that what if I have all the king's horses and all the king's men and the book doesn't do? That was a real fear that I had. But I just decided that, I had done my best, and I just had to take satisfaction in that it was my best. But I was not telling Oprah's secret. No, ma'am. I didn't tell nobody. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody. People would say, how's the book coming? I was like, I'm optimistic.
And I'm going to be the bearer of bad news. We have one more question, and then we'll be ending for tonight. So there you go.
Ask something upbeat. We got to leave on a high note. Okay, go ahead. You can ask that.
You were talking about your success, and we only see the Oprah brand and, you on social media. But I was wondering if you could talk about a failure or a disappointment that made you the writer that you are today.
I actually don't think that disappointments do happen and they make you continue to struggle. But I think the thing that has made me a writer has actually been not the disappointments, but the encouragement. I have loved to write all my life. And I like to write. When I was a little girl, I would write little books and staple them and such. But I never thought that I could be a writer or that I was an intellectual. And I really believe it's because I was a girl. I think that when you're a young girl and a young woman, people separate girls into two categories, girls who are nice and girls who are not nice. And if you like to read and you keep to yourself and you write, they think it's a character issue, not an intellectual issue, that you are nice, like you're a nice girl that's in the library. Nobody ever got pregnant in the library. Like that's how you're categorized, and that's the end of discussion. Nobody ever said to me when I was a girl growing up, what are you reading? What are you writing? What are you thinking about? It was just like that's one less thing that anyone has to worry about because you're safely in that safe girl category. But when I went to Spelman College, I met a writer, and she was my teacher. She's associated with Dillard University also. Her name is Pearl Clegg. And Pearl was my teacher, and I took a creative writing class from her, and she asked me one day, she says, "What are you reading?" She says, "What are you thinking about?" And I got ready to tell her, and she says, "No, write it down." And that, I credit that as the moment that I came to understand my role in my own mind, in my own intellectual life differently. And just that encouragement from one teacher when I was a teenager made me believe that I could be a writer, that what I was doing I wasn't just playing around, that I was doing something serious, and I had been preparing for it all my life. And that is the thing that I kept with me when I have a challenge. I always remember Pearl saying, "What are you reading? What are you thinking? No, don't tell me, write it down." So thank you very much, everyone.